Well, good evening, everybody. So tonight we're gonna look at some kind of unknown features regarding the 6500 inverters. They're in the manual for everybody to see, but they seem to get overlooked a lot. So let's dive in and we'll learn about them together. So we're going to start off in the manual tonight, and the features that I really wanted to look at that seem to get overlooked, they're talked about in two different places. So you can see right now, this is the copy of the latest manual. I just recently downloaded this from Signature Solar's site. I believe this is version 2.3.1. And on page 30, you see this top section. It talks about function keys and what the function keys do. And so you can see the first set of function keys. You can control the USB OTG functions. I don't know what those are. The next function key has to deal with timer settings for the output source priority. And then the next key has to do with the charger source priority. So to get to the information about what these features actually do and how to change them, you got to go all the way to page 51. These are all the USB function settings, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that's what it's called, so that's what we're going to go with. So let's see here. There are 3 function keys. Yeah, we know about the buttons. We can't do any of the actual USB functions. We can't export the data log. This looks more like it's for support type stuff. So we're just going to move on to the actual timer-based settings. And these are the things that I really think that most people don't know about. You kind of overlook it because it's all talking about, it's all under this USB settings section. So let's see here. We can set a timer for changing the output source priority. So we can change between USB, SUB, and SBU. And currently I am in Solar Battery Utility, SBU. So press and hold this second button for 3 seconds to enter timer setup mode. 1, 2, 3. And then press one of these 3 buttons to determine the mode that you want to select. So let's switch to SUB. Okay. So this top one is for USB, the middle one is SUB, and the bottom is SBU. You got your kind of battery icon, your grid icon, and then this one's just USB. There you go, USB, little icon. And if you don't do anything within so many seconds, it does time out. So let's go back in, press and hold for 3 seconds, press for SUB. So you can set these values based on when you want these modes to be set. Okay. So you're going to press the specific button to select the different type that you want. And then you're going to press the up and down buttons to adjust the values for the hour and the minute that you want things to change. Is it hour or is it just minute? Let's see. 1 hour increments. So then what's the first set of numbers for? I don't know. Let's find out. All right. Press this button. 1, 2, 3. It is currently 7:30 at my current time. So this is military time. So 20 should be, let's try 7. Okay, so you have to set the value And then you come down to the bottom value. Let's just see if this is minutes or if this is hours. So this must be your time window. So between these times is when you want to be in SUB mode. Okay, so I'm going to set this for 9 o'clock. Enter, and I'm going to come up here. Oops. So 20. So 8 o'clock. So 8 o'clock, I believe the first value is the switch to value, and then the second value is switch back. Yes. Okay, so looking at the manual, press the button to select the start time, and then you press this button to select your start time, press this button to select your end time. And boy, that really just times out really fast, doesn't it? So what this does is every day at 8 o'clock it should switch to SUB, and at 9 o'clock it should switch back to where you were. At least that's my assumption. It doesn't really say anything about switching back that I can see. So I guess it's going to remember where it was at. Now, the next option is timer setting for changing the charging source priority. So we can press and hold this bottom button, and this takes us into the charging source priority. So solar only, let me see here. Solar first, solar and utility, and only solar. And it's the same thing. You set your start times and your end times. So if you want to set it to charge from utility, solar and utility, in fact, we should be able to do this. So we're going to do the same thing. So at the moment, my inverters are all set to solar only. Only solar, okay? So we're going to come in here into this charging priority, and we are going to say solar and utility, and we are going to start this the same time. We're going to see if we can change both of these values at the exact same time. So we're going to have it run on solar charging starting at 8 o'clock, and then we hit enter to set the value. Come down here for the end time, and we are going to go to 9 o'clock. So we will run for 1 hour, solar and utility, and escape. Of these two settings, the only one that should actually manipulate both inverters is the output source priority, because when that changes on one unit, it automatically changes it on both. So both of them are going to change to solar utility backup at 8 o'clock, but this unit only is going to change to solar and utility charging. That's one of those features. There's a handful of them, but that's one of those features that is per inverter, even in the split phase setup. So the setting should change at 8 o'clock. It probably won't start charging from utility until about 8:30-ish. But again, we should be able to see that in Solar Assistant. And if I actually look at that real quick, as long as this is actually inverter 2, we should be charging with 30 amps going into the battery when that kicks on. So even if I'm upstairs, I should hear the fan start to really ramp up. So this should be pretty slick though, being able to change these modes dynamically. And I'll be honest, I have overlooked these time and time again because I see USB, and so I just kind of skim past this stuff. So what I'm going to do is we'll stop all the cameras. I'm not going to waste your time or mine or footage even or battery power. So we'll come down again at about 7:57 and see if everything changes like it's supposed to. All right, by my watch it says 7:59. The inverter's at 7:57. So we have less than 3 minutes to wait and see what happens. Currently at 63% battery. Only 35 watts of PV coming in. Let's see here, on inverter 2, assuming that this one is inverter 2, 26 watts of PV. So more PV coming in on this inverter than on inverter 1, which makes sense based on how I have things laid out. I don't know, I'm kind of excited to see if it works. There's no second counter or anything on this, so I don't know what the second time's at. There's nothing that blinks in sequence. So we just kind of have to wait for that to roll over. So we'll take a look and see if there's anything on the display that signifies a time, which I'm wondering if this little clock here, if that signifies that we're on the clock page, if that signifies that we have a timer set. We'll take a look at that in a minute. I wonder if the actual menu option changes, showing what the mode of the inverter is, or is it just that stays what the value was, so that it knows what to revert back to. Oh, 8 o'clock. You see the lights just changed. That's cool. So there's nothing, looking at the display, that little clock was just that I was on the clock page. So there's nothing that signifies that you are in a time programmable mode. So let's go into the menu. The menu still says SBU. So it's going to retain the value of whatever it has to change back to. Which, I guess, you know, it makes sense. So at 8 o'clock, the inverters switched from solar battery utility to solar utility battery. They should remain that way for 1 hour. Now, because I don't know exactly when solar is going to go out, I'm going to actually simulate that right now. I'm going to turn off PV to inverter 2. Inverter 1, it doesn't matter, remember, because the charging source is selectable per inverter. So I'm going to turn off PV to my inverter 2, and as soon as I do that, we should see in Solar Assistant, and we should hear it too, all of a sudden it should start charging with 30 amps. So if I open the breaker up, turn off these breakers, it starts to ramp up. And you can see on Solar Assistant, we're now at 1400 watts going into the battery. Battery current on inverter 2, 30 amps. Pushing 1500 watts in. So both settings changed at 8 o'clock. So that's nice to know that you can set both of them to the same value at the same times, and they should set the way that you want them to at the exact same time. I'm going to go off a little rabbit trail here real quick. This is a great example of solar first and solar and utility working the same way. So I had to turn off PV, even though this is in solar and utility charging mode. I had to turn off PV in order to get the inverter to actually charge with utility. So if I turn the PV back on, we can see on the display, PV came back in, charging is going to turn off and ramp down. And now that we have solar coming in, you see we do not show grid charging anymore. Signature Solar is aware of this, and supposedly it's going to get fixed in a future firmware update. So now we will wait. I'll come back down again just before 9 o'clock, and we will make sure that everything switches back to the way it was at 9 o'clock. Okay, so we're under a minute left. And the fan should roll down, the inverters should switch back to SBU mode. So that's interesting. They're not changing back. It's 9 o'clock, so why not? So we're gonna step back into this setting. 1, 2, 3. SUB. And if we look at the manual, the first value should be the start time, the second value should be the end time, and yet it's not changing back. So why is that? Press the button to set up solar first timer, press button to select the start time, up or down, button to adjust the volume, press enter to confirm, press the button, lower button to select the end time, press up or down button to adjust the values, press enter to confirm. These setting values are from 00 to 2300 with a 1 hour increment. Eight o'clock, 9 o'clock. All right, well, obviously something's not working right. So apparently it can switch to the mode, it just can't switch out of the mode. So I wonder if I can turn this off. As soon as I switch those back to 0, then it turned off. So I'm going to have to do a little more investigating on that one. And I remember Sky Power with Carl made the comment, which I hadn't really thought much about. He said, make sure you don't use 0 when you're setting these time-based settings. And I just thought that 0 meant midnight. No, 0 means off. So you can set these between 1 a.m. and 11 p.m., but apparently you can't set it at midnight. So don't set it to 00 because that means disable, turn it off. But I really want to know why this setting isn't turning off like it's supposed to. I'll have to reach out to Signature Solar and see what they have to say about that one. Because this should be a fairly straightforward. You set a start time, you set an end time, and as soon as it hits that end time, that's it. So let's talk about use cases. So the time of use settings that are built into these inverters, I believe should be built into the Sun Gold Power, the LV6548, the Orient Power, and any other flavor of Voltronic inverter of this style that I'm missing. But the big thing with this is time of use charges from your utility. So if you have a utility that charges you a higher rate during the day when more power is being used, then you could program your inverters that before that set time, you automatically switch over to battery power. And then you let it run for that higher time of use window, and then you program it to set back when it's done. The same goes in regards to, you know, lower charging rates overnight. So if you don't have a solar array, but you have these inverters and a set of batteries for backup power for your home, and all you do is you use the power from here when you lose power, but then you recharge from the grid. You can program these to recharge from the grid at a time of day when it's the cheapest for you. Now, there's not advanced timer settings with these. It's hour-based only. There's no minutes. There's no days. So whatever time you set is going to be the same time every day. So keep that in mind. But the fact that you can use these inverters out of the box to help save you money when your utility charges you more, that's a pretty nice feature. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised that I don't hear a whole lot of people talking about it even more. So I've been doing this about 7.5 months, and I can think of one person that has mentioned that they actually use these timer settings. All right, sorry for the noise. I've got like 5,000 watts of PV coming in at the time. If you know anything about me, then you know that I have a hard time leaving issues unsolved. So I want to run yet another test and see if I can figure out why these units aren't switching back when the timer's up. So I did make an interesting discovery, so we're going to go in. I'm in battery mode right now, as you can tell. So I'm going to go into SUB, and I've got 1313 set as an end time. So I'm going to change the end time to be 14. So if you change the value to the time that you're in right now, so between 1 and 2, the unit should switch to that timer. I hope that's clear. So because I'm within that time range, the unit instantly switched, and it is 256 right now. So my theory right now is that the end time is the last hour that you want this to run. And so far that seems somewhat promising to me. So the start time is as soon as it hits 1 o'clock, it switches. The end time is it needs to run through whatever you set the end time as, and then it will switch back. So currently we are at 1457, so we're going to wait until 3 o'clock, 1500 hours, and see if it switches back. Alright. It switched. So just to recap, we're going to go back in here real quick to SUB. So the first value is the actual start time. The second value is once it is past this value completely, which means it has to go through 2 o'clock completely and change to 3 o'clock before it switches out of the mode. It's completely unclear in the manual. It does not state that at all. It also doesn't state that 0 is a shut-off value. So you need to be aware of that. So if I wanted to set this to only be 1 hour, I would have to do it like that. 13 to 13. So that means that it's going to run from 1 o'clock to the end of 1 o'clock and then switch back. So that would be a 1 hour timer. And unfortunately, there's no indicator on the display that you have a timer set or that you're in a timer mode. You just gotta consciously be aware if you have these values set. All right, well, it took a couple of days to figure this out, but I'm glad that I kept chasing that rabbit down the rabbit hole to figure out exactly how to make these timers work. But I hope this helps, especially for those of you that need the time of use settings. I think come summertime, when my utility starts charging more for daytime hours, I will go through and set these values as well, just to make sure that I am not utilizing any grid power during those times and getting charged more. So with that, I'm going to let y'all go. Y'all stay safe, and we'll catch up with you later.